Long before maps named, long before empires claimed,
New Zealand was one of the last major landmasses on Earth to be settled by humans. The first arrivals, Polynesian navigators around the 13th century, master ocean navigators from East Polynesia crossed thousands of miles of open Pacific in large double-hulled canoes. Guided by stars, winds, currents, and generations of knowledge, they reached the remote islands they would call Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud. These settlers became the Māori, the first people of New Zealand. Over centuries, Māori communities adapted to a cooler climate very different from tropical Polynesia. They developed a distinct culture deeply rooted in Whakapapa genealogy identity tied to ancestors when a land not property, but a living ancestor, mana authority, prestige, spiritual power. Māori society and way of life. Māori society was highly organized and tribal. The largest political group was the Iwi tribe. Subtribes were called Hap. Extended families formed No leadership came from Rangatira chiefs, whose authority depended on lineage, wisdom, and the ability to protect and provide for their people. Life revolved around fortified villages known as P, often built on hills for defense. Warfare was part of intertribal politics, driven by disputes over land, honor, or revenge. Combat was close and personal, using weapons like tayaha, long wooden staff weapon, mere short club, often made of greenstone. But Māori culture was not defined by war alone. It flourished in art, spirituality, and oral tradition. Wakero, intricate wood carving, decorated meeting houses and canoes. Timoko, sacred tattooing, recorded identity and status. Waiata songs, NPR cow stories preserved history. Above all, Māori life was bound to the land, rivers, and forests, not as resources to own, but relatives to respect. First glimpses from Europe in 1642, Dutch explorer Abel Tasman became the first European known to sight New Zealand. His visit was brief and violent. A clash with local Māori led him to leave without landing. More than a century later, in 1769, British explorer Captain James Cook arrived. Unlike Tasman, Cook circumnavigated and mapped the islands in detail. His voyages opened New Zealand to European knowledge and soon to European exploitation. Whalers, sealers, and traders. By the late 18th and early 19th centuries, European and American whalers and sealers began operating around New Zealand's coasts. Temporary settlements appeared, bringing metal tools and weapons, muskets, new crops, and livestock. Diseases previously unknown to Māori trade relationships developed. Māori quickly recognized the power of muskets, leading to a series of intertribal conflicts known as the Musket Wars in the early 1800s. These wars reshaped tribal boundaries and caused significant population movement and loss of life. British colonization begins as more settlers arrived. Britain grew concerned about lawlessness and rival European powers. In 1840, the British Crown moved to formally establish authority. This led to one of the most important and controversial documents in New Zealand's history, the Treaty of Waitangi 1840, signed between representatives of the British Crown and many Māori chiefs. The treaty had two main versions, one in English and one in Māori. Crucially, the meanings did not fully match. The English version suggested Māori ceded sovereignty to Britain. The Māori version implied they granted governance while retaining authority over their lands and affairs. These differences would shape the nation's future. The treaty allowed Britain to claim New Zealand as a colony while promising Māori protection of their lands and rights. In reality, those promises were often ignored. Land, war, and resistance as settler numbers increased, demand for land grew. Disputes over land sales, often involving misunderstanding, pressure, or outright fraud, led to escalating tension. From the 1840s through the 1870s, a series of conflicts known as the New Zealand Wars erupted between Māori groups and British or colonial forces. These were not small skirmishes. They involved fortified Māori defenses that impressed European military observers, large-scale troop deployments, land confiscations. After Māori resistance, the wars resulted in massive loss of Māori land, economic base, and political power. Entire regions were taken as punishment, deepening long-lasting grievances. Rise of settler society. Meanwhile, European settlement expanded rapidly. Towns grew into cities like Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch. Dunedin. New Zealand's economy became built on agriculture, especially after the development of refrigerated shipping in the 1880s. Suddenly, meat and dairy could be exported to Britain. Sheep farming exploded. Vast pastoral landscapes turned into one of the world's great wool and meat exporters. By the late 19th century, New Zealand's prosperity was closely tied to distant markets, especially Britain, which became its primary trading partner and cultural reference point. A loyal dominion of the Empire, New Zealand saw itself as proudly British. It adopted British institutions, laws, and traditions. In 1907, it became a dominion within the British Empire, self-governing, but still loyal to the crown. That loyalty was tested in war. World War I, a nation baptized in fire. In 1915, New Zealand troops joined the Allied campaign at Gallipoli in modern-day Tiraki. The campaign was a military failure, but its emotional impact was enormous. For a small country, the losses were devastating. Gallipoli and later battles on the Western Front helped forge a sense that New Zealand was no longer just an extension of Britain, but a nation with its own sacrifice, grief, and identity. Anzac Day, shared with Australia, became a sacred day of remembrance. World War II, defending a distant home. In World War II, New Zealand again fought alongside Britain, sending forces to Europe, North Africa, and the Pacific. When Japan entered the war, the threat came closer than ever before. The war strengthened ties with the United States and began shifting New Zealand's strategic outlook away from complete reliance on Britain. Building a fairer society between the wars and after World War II, New Zealand became known for bold social reforms. It was among the first countries in the world to build a modern welfare state, introducing state housing, social security, public health care expansion, strong labor protections. These policies aimed to create a more equal society, and for much of the mid-20th century, New Zealand enjoyed a reputation as a stable, prosperous, and socially progressive nation. Life at the edge of the world, geographic isolation shaped everything. New Zealand was far from major markets, far from political centers, far from global conflict zones. This distance fostered a culture of self-reliance, practicality, and ingenuity. Communities were tight-knit. Outdoor life, farming, fishing, rugby, and connection to nature became central to identity. At the same time, Māori culture, though marginalized for decades, never disappeared. Language, traditions, and tribal structures endured, setting the stage for cultural revival later in the 20th century. A distinct national identity emerges. By the late 20th century, New Zealand was no longer simply Britain in the South Pacific. It was becoming something unique, a society shaped by both Māori and European heritage, a country increasingly independent in foreign policy, a people who saw themselves as practical, egalitarian, and quietly proud. The journey had been marked by exploration, conflict, loss, adaptation, and reinvention. From Polynesian voyagers navigating by the stars to a modern nation finding its own voice. New Zealand's early history is the story of how a remote group of islands became a country forged by land, struggle, and the meeting of worlds. If the early centuries of New Zealand's story were about discovery, conflict, and settlement, the present day is about maturity, identity, and balance, balancing tradition and innovation, heritage and diversity, isolation and global engagement, modern democracy and political stability. New Zealand is a stable parliamentary democracy and constitutional monarchy. Its political system evolved from its colonial roots into one widely admired for transparency, accountability, and fairness. The parliament in Wellington, the capital city, steers national policy, while local governments handle regional priorities. Elections are regular, peaceful, and competitive indicators of a strong democratic culture that reflects the will of its citizens. This political stability provides a firm foundation for social progress, economic planning, and international cooperation. The Treaty of Waitangi, from history to modern law. Though the Treaty of Waitangi 1840 once seemed a historical relic, it has come alive in modern New Zealand. Today, the treaty plays a central role in legal and political debates. Courts and government institutions use it as a framework for protecting Māori rights, advising policy decisions, and settling historic grievances over land and resources. Through treaty settlements, many Iwi tribes have received financial redress and cultural recognition for past injustices, shaping a more inclusive society that acknowledges history instead of ignoring it. Māori cultural revival and bilingual identity. After decades of marginalization, Māori culture and language Te Reo Māori have experienced a powerful revival. This renaissance includes Kura Kaupapa Māori schools, where teaching is in Te Reo Māori, media and arts celebrating Māori heritage, and official bilingualism. Te Reo Māori is an official language of New Zealand. Symbols of Māori culture, such as the haka, a traditional challenge or chant, and woven artwork, now stand proudly alongside national traditions, expressing a uniquely New Zealand identity rooted in both Māori and Pika non-Māori heritage. Modern cities, hubs of life and innovation. New Zealand's urban landscape reflects its growth and diversity. Auckland, the largest and most multicultural city, a dynamic economic engine. Wellington, the political heart known for culture cafes and the arts. Christchurch, a resilient city rebuilding vibrancy after major earthquakes. These centers are cosmopolitan places where global influences mix with Kiwi culture, innovation thrives, and community life is rich and varied. A diversified modern economy. While agriculture remains central, New Zealand's economy has broadened far beyond sheep and wool. Key sectors include agriculture and horticulture, dairy, beef, kiwifruit, wine, tourism. Spectacular landscapes attract visitors from around the world. Film and media production, with international hits putting New Zealand on the global map. Technology and innovation, startups and tech hubs are growing fast. Trade partnerships, strong links with Asia, the Pacific, Europe, and beyond. New Zealand exports both goods and experiences, blending natural beauty with modern commerce. Environmental leadership and climate action. Given its island ecology, New Zealanders are deeply connected to the environment. The nation is recognized for conservation programs protecting unique flora and fauna, environmental policies addressing climate change, and renewable energy production and clean technologies. This leadership reflects a long-standing respect for the land and ethos rooted in both Māori values and the practical realities of living on fragile island ecosystems. Education and quality of life. New Zealanders enjoy high-quality education, vibrant universities, and a system that supports learning for all ages. Healthcare, public services, and community infrastructure contribute to a high standard of living, strong social support systems, and a culture that values well-being and balance. For many people, New Zealand combines modern opportunity with an outdoors-oriented lifestyle that prizes nature, sport, and family life. Global image and cultural influence. Though geographically distant, New Zealand's brand is strong worldwide. It is known for friendly people and safety, stunning landscapes featured in global tourism and films, cultural contributions including music, art, and stories that resonate internationally, and a reputation for fairness, innovation, and progressive values. New Zealand punches above its weight on the global stage, participating in diplomacy, international aid, and cultural exchange. Challenges of the 21st century. No nation is without its struggles, and New Zealand faces several. Housing crisis. Rising property prices make homes unaffordable for many. Cost of living pressures, especially in cities, brain drain talented young people moving abroad for opportunities, and balancing tradition with globalization, preserving culture while engaging worldwide. These modern challenges are shaped by history, patterns of land ownership, economic choices, and the legacy of isolation that sometimes makes global connection both enriching and difficult. Balancing past and present. What makes New Zealand unique is how its past continues to shape its present. The Treaty of Waitangi influences law and identity. Māori culture enriches national life. Historical isolation fostered self-reliance and creative innovation, and settlement and migration built a mosaic of communities. Far from being stuck in the past, New Zealand uses its history to guide its future, blending respect for heritage with a bold global outlook. In 2026, New Zealand stands as a nation that began at the edge of the world and now engages with it, confidently rooted in land enriched by culture and striving toward a future that honors both tradition and change.